So now we finally get to talk about some of the meat. So if we press D, we can bring up the helper again, and we're looking at the collection slider. And you might think, hey, this is the slider for the collection where we place our cutters. That would be wrong. This is actually the recall collection, which now has a higher importance in Boxcutter, which I'll be emphasizing more in the future. One of my favorite buttons with the collection is the ability to be able to click and change what color my collection for cutters is. Usually I always have it as red, but sometimes I just change it on the fly. In this latest update, we actually made it where whenever you change the collection color, it actually updates the collection on the fly. So that means that, let's draw this, we see that we have a blue cutter collection. If I were to press D and we change this over to orange, we see that the collection in the outliner is now orange. If we press D and we change it to blue, it's now blue. It's just a small thing, but it's one of those things that I love. But let's talk about recall collections and why it's a thing now. So if we press Shift A, we can add a plane. I'll press GX, move this plane over to the side. We'll press Alt X using HardOps and put a mirror on it. And we'll press Shift D, move this one over, and press Shift R to repeat that operation. So now we have a mirrored plane, and we have 3 mirrored planes. So I'm just going to use Box, and we're just going to perform a couple of cuts on them, just random. Mirror, just making our lives a little bit easier. Boxcutter, of course, supports 2D cutting, so we're just getting in here and just cutting some designs. You know, nothing major, just something to play with. And let's take these 3 and we will now move them to a new collection just called Extra, read all about it. We'll press 1 to go back to our main collection, and if we were to press D now and we change our collection over to extras, this doesn't really show anything really in particular. However, if we were to say draw a box and we get the box exactly where we want, we can now press D and we see that the options for origin have moved out the way and given way to shape recall options. These are normally delegated to alt scrolling in order to scroll through whatever collection you have marked as your recall, but now there's arrows, which is something that I'm just such a big fan of. This was one of the preliminary things in the sketches that I wanted added, and just being able to have these in front of the user for them to be able to click on the fly is just amazing. So here we are just clicking through the various presets that are available in the collection that we just set up. And even better, we can click on rotate inside, which is delegated to Shift R and also Shift tilde, but now is a button that users can click where you can choose to rotate it inside. And these shapes are pretty much mirrored on the Z because they're pretty much solidified, flattened shapes. So flipping them on the Z isn't going to do anything, but being able to scroll through them just readily on the fly is just something that was previously not accessible with Boxcutter and is probably one of the biggest things. So we just click to apply. We'll just click and drag to create another box here, and we could press D, just click through our collection, bring out a couple of custom shapes, click, and we're done. We'll do the same thing on this side. Press D, choose which one we want, maybe rotate it inside, and we see that we still have options for the origins that are being set by us whenever we scale. But if you want to adjust the draw origin in terms of dimensions, they are available here, but those options do get moved out of the way in order to make room for this, because it does take greater precedence during draw. Normally you're not trying to change your drawing to center draw in the middle of your drawing, but if you are, we do still offer an override for that. But this is one of my favorite aspects of Boxcutter, and it's connected with collection. So whenever you're using Boxcutter, if you have shapes that you like in a collection, you can now mark them as a collection. You can unmark it as a collection, which means that now whenever we draw shapes, we are actually recalling them from the cutters collection. So I could just press C and we can cycle through our custom cutters to see what we get, and eventually we'll get to those shapes that we had previously. But if we want to get back to those previous shapes that we had that were in a dedicated collection to scroll through, we're able to do that just by setting up our recall collection, and now I can press C and cycle through them. But if you're not a fan of the hotkeys, or even just pressing Alt Scroll, which is just one of my favorites in Boxcutter, from either changing shapes or changing shapes like we're talking about here, you're also able to do it inside of the D helper. But that's one of the reasons that collection is one of the prime options at the top of Boxcutter. If we click on collection being highlighted, we see that we're able to go in and actually specify specific things about Boxcutter. For example, what collection we're placing our cutters in, what collection we're recalling, and even if we want to cycle all cutters, which was a big emphasis on a previous release, by checking this, you can make it toggle only cutters that have interesting names, or if you have it off, it will toggle through every cutter named cube, box, box 001, box 002, and so on. But by having this off, you can actually make it only cycle through prime cutters. But if you're unaware of it, you probably want to leave it on by default so you ensure that you see the shape that you want to see. But we want to emphasize over custom cutter collections and being able to control them on the fly in future releases. But this is just one of the first steps, is putting it first and foremost to users to be able to get in and get the most out of using reusable collections.